Hello, everyone. Daniel King here again with another episode of Your Group Practice. And today I'm looking forward to a juicy conversation with Patrick Cleveland, LMFT and founder of Daybreak Counseling Center, which is in Long Beach and Cerritos, beautiful Southern California. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
How am I? I am embroiled in way too much work, but I'm relying on you to be the fun part of my day. Can you live up to
Oh,
the billing?
we'll see, man. I'll try my best. Yeah.
There you go. Patrick, what got you into opening a group practice? Why did you do that?
Well, I'm sure this story's been told a lot of times on your show, but just I could only see so many clients myself. And my goal was not to do group practice. I really enjoyed being in private practice, having my own office, and really, really enjoyed that. And that was great. And then someone said, an associate called and said, "Hey, I really like your website. Can I come? Can I work for you?" And I said, "Okay, well, yeah, you can take Saturday." And then someone else called and said the same thing. And she took Sunday. And that's kind of how it started. And then I just kept getting calls from clients who had bad therapy experiences. That was kind of the impetus for growth, or like to start a group, was just that continued conversation, because at this time I didn't have a practice manager. I was doing all the intakes, I was answering the phone, and so I would constantly get these calls from people who had a bad therapy experience. And it was usually one of two things: one, I went to therapy and my therapist didn't say anything and it was really awkward and weird, or the more common one, which was I went to therapy, they gave me a bunch of homework that I didn't wanna do, and I didn't get to tell my story. And that really, would bum me out to hear that. So then that really let me know that there was a space for, humanistic, person-centered psychodynamic therapy, where the focus was on the client and letting them lead and tell their story, and not, the more sort of manualized approaches that are being taught in graduate schools today.
So, since you had a bunch of therapists with an impetus to join you that they didn't think therapy was being done well out there, how do you ensure that you're providing something higher quality? How do you actually solve that problem?
Mainly in hiring. So I look for therapists that share the same vision and the same goals and values that we do. And yeah, unfortunately, that's a really hard thing to track. Like sometimes I'll joke about that with the therapist on my team. I'll call them up and I'll be like, "Hey, you're doing a really good job. Your retention is good, but the healing just isn't there. Like your healing level, like you need to heal more. Which is totally stupid and silly. Like, I'm just joking with them, and then we all kind of bust out laughing because it's this factor that, like, how do we really track that? And so it's a mystery. I think it's the way we track it more is like, and I always tell them this too, is like, unfortunately, it's like in not hearing anything bad. Like, the only time it's hard to track things going good if you're not
Mm.
doing like surveys and sort of like, that's doing client surveys, I guess, which I don't do and I don't believe in. So if we're not getting signs that things are going bad, like client retention is bad, or we're getting complaints, clients are dropping like flies, then we tend to believe that things are going good. Yeah. So I know, probably not the answer most people want to hear.
Why don't you do client surveys? Why don't you believe in them?
It just feels intrusive, and it feels like, one, I'm not too big on goals either, like having goals, like the idea of a treatment plan and goals and all of that, documentation, treatment plans, all of that I see as an aside. Like, I see it as something that we have to do because the licensing board tells us to do it. Like, if I had my way, I would never do a treatment plan. I would never have goals. I would never write progress notes. That's how I would do it if I could do it my way. You know what I mean? But this is the way we have to do it. So, yeah, to me, therapy is more of an art, like,
Mm.
rather than this scientific thing where we have goals and we're like tracking outcomes and things like that. It's like, people come, they tell me what they want to work on, maybe in the first phone call, first session, and
Mm.
and then they come for as long as they want. And I don't, once in a while, if I feel like things are stagnating or we're not doing anything or going anywhere, I'll kind of ask, like, "Hey, how's," kind of check in, "Hey, how therapy is going?" Or, something like that. "Is there anything else you want to work on?" I might, if I get that feeling, which is pretty rare, or ever, but I guess that maybe that's why I don't particularly believe in client surveys. And then that would just be, and like I said before, I hate paperwork. So that would be more paperwork for me that I already don't like, that I'd have to do more of. Yeah.
Paperwork either, but we might be in the wrong business, both of us.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious then, if for you therapy is more art than science, what are some of the drawbacks of the scientific approach to like results measurement and an obsession with making therapy more scientific? Are there real drawbacks you see to that?
Back to the outcome, right? Like to get the outcome, like it's almost like this. You're focused on the end goal instead of the process, and it's like the idea of the philosophical approach of like the therapist is doing the work, or I'm going to do something to you to generate this outcome, versus
Mm,
I'm going to create a space where something can happen, where the thing that you want can happen, and it's a less is more approach. So I guess outcome wise, like or like the downside to that is one, the therapist can be too preoccupied with their agenda. Like I have an agenda to have this outcome, so they can have like all these interventions in their head and like, oh, this is how the session's gonna go, and all that, which kind of ignores the subjectivity of the human being and their experience and the what something mystical and magical that can emerge here because you got so much in your head there,
yes.
in terms of, like, what you think it's gonna go. So, like, there's an old Buddhist proverb about this, like, the student goes to the master and says, how long will I take to reach enlightenment?" And he says, I think he says 10 years or something. He says, "Well, how about if I try really hard?" And then he goes, "Well, 20 years." And he goes, "Well, how about if I try even harder?" And then he goes, "Well, 30 years." You know what I mean? Like, in other words, if you have one eye on the outcome, you don't have your both eyes on the process, right? And so I think that can be a downside. The big research is that the therapy relationship is really what is the biggest factor in change. And so even people who are sort of in those camps, they tend to, from what I know, like get good outcomes as well. But that would be another downside, I guess, would be the way it would affect the therapy relationship. Those phone calls I would get from people saying, "Hey, my therapist didn't let me tell my story. I got a bunch of boring homework I didn't want to do." So that could be another sort of uh, downside of, you think you're doing this thing, but really the client wants something else. But they're just following your lead because you're supposed to be the expert. So it can cause all these sorts of weird mismatch problems.
One way to think about what you're saying is that super important relationship between therapist and clinician. It's easy for the therapist to get into their head, and it's easy for them to try to impose their sense of how the sessions should go. The reality is, human life and healing are such complex forces. We don't really understand exactly how people heal. We don't really understand the complexity of life. And so, by just showing up with some humility and purely seeking to create a space, we can let the mystery unfold as it's meant to.
Yeah, I like that a lot. What's coming to mind too is recently I'm going to be volunteering doing free therapy at Homeboy Industries in East Los Angeles, which is a gang recovery program. Father Boyle there, he has a similar approach. They're asking him like about outcomes and whatnot, and this is what draw me to them too. Was we have this a similar philosophy of how do you do gang rehabilitation? What do you
Yes.
do to them? What are you as an older white male, help these Hispanic gang members? And he says, I don't do anything. I
Yeah.
create a space for change to emerge. And that clicked. I was like, oh yeah, that's us. Like that's exactly what we're doing. Is like it's a less is more. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Change happens when people feel safe. When they have a relationship, a trust, and
Yeah.
and that's when that's when things happen. That's when the real therapy starts to happen, rather than this sort of evidence based or outcome focused therapist who is constantly doing and filling the space with worksheets, homework, talking. Sometimes silence is the best intervention.
One of the things I've come to believe is that the sort of energetic connection between people can be so healing when we seek to control it. Even just thinking about an outcome in your head sometimes can create this almost kind of energy of control. And I think that's felt subconsciously. It's felt at deeper levels by people. And there's ways in which, I mean, I'm not a therapist. I used to be a coach. In working with owners of therapy practices, I can see how in super vulnerable moments, in my case, we're investing in their business. We're talking about a very deep partnership. The energy of it's easy to sort of impose my agenda on the moment. And it's easy to, as a business person, think about all of the goals that your investors or that the larger institution that you operate within, it's so easy to be motivated by those goals. And it's not necessarily that I think we should reject them completely, but there is something so powerful about the authenticity of allowing someone else's truth to emerge and being guided by that. It's easier in a way. It's more relaxing for me.
Yeah. No, definitely. I listen to Rick Rubin a lot, who's like
Huh?
a music producer, and, and once again, like just his approach to art. Don't force anything, don't push anything. Let it flow naturally, let it emerge. Like I really, I really like that. Or like, I've heard like Dr. Dre and Pharrell, talk about like the moment you get into a studio and you even have the thought of we want to make a hit song, like everything goes to shit, and
Yes.
and and
Yes.
and like no hit song ever come that way. You know what I mean? Like of we're gonna make a hit.
Have you heard of, in your study of French philosophers, have you come across Rene Girard? Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, the name does ring a bell.
So he's become famous. He's dead. He became famous for mimetic theory. And I bring it up here. My crazy mind is bringing it up here because mimetic theory is a theory of human desire. It's about why do people want the things they want. And what he would have said was that most of the things we think we want, we don't truly at a deeper inner level actually want. These are imposed desires. So we see people in the world who model certain ways of being, and those models plant seeds in our head, plant seeds of desire. We see someone who, we see the rapper with the champagne and the really cool car, right? And we want those things. Had we not seen a model, we wouldn't want those things. Whereas the deeper work of life, he would say, I think, is to get in touch with your internal, truer desires, separate from all of the models that you see around you. And so in therapy or in a business context, you could sort of say that we're spreading mimesis, we're spreading mimetic content by imposing our agenda, as opposed to enabling people to be in touch with what is true within themselves.
Absolutely. One of the reasons I did a second master's in philosophy, and one of the reasons I did that was because I felt like a lot of questions, a lot of things that people take for granted in the mental health world, like what is the good life?
Hmm.
How ought we to behave? These questions I felt like were taken for granted. What is happiness? What is meaning? I feel like a lot of those questions were kind of taken for granted in mental health circles, which was at the time at least a real drive towards like be positive, like positive thinking that sort of backdrop to cognitive behavioral therapy. You've got negative thoughts, and those need to change.
Hmm.
And that is like a sort of a zeitgeist, or like in the ethos at the time, and still is to some degree. But just those kind of questions about this sort of influence to be that way or to think that way, or like, oh, this is the way, which really is it though, and are there
Hmm.
other ways of being or other answers to these questions that at least in the therapy world they kind of take for granted sometimes, I think.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much potential for philosophy and therapy to interact. And they generally, I mean, is your experience that they're not interacting that much?
My experience is that I interact all the time, that people come in with really profound spiritual questions, existential
Mm.
questions, especially right now, there's a lot of talking around about, the meaning crisis, right?
Mm.
Like that, a lot of people are not feeling a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, the sort of spiritual vacuum that the capitalist system provides. Not that I have anything against capitalism, but it does focus on the dollar and the product, primarily, and leaving out the spiritual component of human life, and because that's like the main focus, and I get that, but that does leave a spiritual vacuum in terms of like, well, why else are we here, and what else are we doing here? People wanting a greater sense of purpose, and so yeah, I feel like those questions come in the room a lot, of like, okay, what are we doing with our lives? Why are we here? Like, I feel like I get that from a lot of younger folks, especially.
One way I might think about that is that just like in the therapy room, mimesis can be a powerful force, can be a very powerful force in capitalistic context too, but that doesn't mean that it has to be. So if I show up in a business context modeling other people, modeling the way they are, instead of bringing my authenticity to the table, then maybe capitalism can be meaningless. So maybe it can contribute to people feeling purposeless. But maybe there's also, just like in therapy, we can just like we've talked about here, your view is there's a less is more approach, which I generally, I think, operate the same way. And I might even sort of add in, when we remove certain inauthentic aspects of self, what we're left with is really interesting and energetically powerful. That can be the case in a therapy room. It can be a case in a business conversation too, in my experience. There's nothing to me inherently about capitalism that fosters meaningless. I think there's certain models, let's say, that we experience of how to do business, this super rushed transactional kind of quality to it. But it doesn't have to be that way. In earlier businesses I was following those models. And in this one, I do less and less. And there's something beautiful about it. And so I hear you. And I think that in any context, I think we have this ability to try to transcend. I'll go back to Gerard here. We have an opportunity to try to transcend mimetic models.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I think that, like, for us as entrepreneurs, like, we are, I mean, just in Western culture in general, right? Like, we're the few, the small, that get to have these discussions and and be able to have that experience and the freedom of being an entrepreneur. I think what I was talking about more is like general population clients who, like, are questioning the American dream, or like the notion of, like, okay, always preparing for this life. Alan Watts always talked about this, that, like, you're preparing for this life that's supposed to happen later, right? Like elementary school, junior high, high school, college. Like, okay, life is going to begin, over here, when it's been going on all the time, right? Which is a form of a mimetic desire in and of itself, just to create a structure like that, where you're desiring this life to be later. And I think a lot of young people are like, okay, so then I go to college, I get the job, and then I work until I die. Like, and I think a lot, there's there's not a lot of spiritual purpose, meaning, sort of the old tribal meaning of initiation, recognition. It's just that, and I think a lot of young people have been questioning that. They see their parents maybe not so happy, or like struggling, or like, oh, like, oh, is this, they see the career life as not so rosy and shiny anymore, and that's where I think the meaning piece comes in.
Yeah.
Of, like, helping them, okay, I get that this is what you're seeing. How can we work together to create a narrative, a story that is going to give your life meaning in the context and the resources that you have, and in what goals you're trying to pursue?
Yes. And maybe part of the way to think about it is that in the present moment, which, a good therapeutic relationship can bring us into a deeper connection with presence, with this moment right now. You point out that so many people are of a mindset, and society creates structures that make us think about this tomorrow that never quite seems to come. Preparing for the future, I think, was the phrase you used. One of the great things about therapy is it can create presence. So what about right now? Right? What about right now? What can we do in this moment? So rather than being stuck in this future that may or may not come, or, who knows what the future is, we all have the present. That's something that we all have in common. And there's so much power, so much spiritual experience that's possible in the present moment. And there's just so many structures of our society that take us out of the present moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Back to we were talking about mimetic desire. One thing that in creating that presence in therapy is, some of those young folks might come in and be like, I really want to do theater, right? I want to major in theater, but my
Yes.
parents say I should, major in business, and
Yes.
then you can help them, right? Because that's a kind of a influence mimetic desire right there, right? Like, your parents are trying to tell you what you should want, or what your dream is, or whatnot, and then you can work with that person to help them navigate that decision.
Yes. Yes. That to me sounds like a pretty interesting way to think about how to build a therapy practice where people are given an opportunity to enter a truly different space than they're in the everyday, right? They're taken out of, at least for a brief moment, they're given an opportunity to truly reflect. And when we integrate some philosophy in there, people are thinking about some of the big questions maybe in a different way. And so that to me sounds super important. So it's good you're doing it.
Thank you, thank you. It's interesting you say that, because the way I built it, and this is different than a lot of other owners. I did model it sort of. I built it exactly how I would want it to be if I were to join a group practice, and so I grew up in East LA. I grew up in with police brutality and oppressive systems and all this sort of stuff. And so I never liked authority. I never liked being told what to do, you know? And so
Mm.
I always tell the people that join my group, being part of Daybreak is like having your own practice, the closest thing to having your own practice without
Yes.
having to do the marketing and the insurance billing and hounding people for credit cards. So,
Yes.
so I try to sell it to them that way, and I don't, I rarely even interact with them. Like if everything's going good, and I'll call them once every other month, maybe. Hey, how you doing? How's it
Yeah.
going? But I don't have meetings.
I love it.
We'll have like a Christmas party, and maybe a lunch in the summer or something. And if they want more stuff like that, we can do that. But yeah, I don't. I give them freedom and autonomy. I'm a big believer in that, because that's what I would want. I don't want my boss all up in my stuff, especially as a therapist. And once again, this goes back to the music approach, right? Which music is a big part of my life. I also do music, and
Mm.
I think it was Jimmy Iovine, right? One of the big producers. He said that same thing, you give the artist the tools that they need and you leave them alone.
Mm.
And that's
Mm.
kind of my approach too with the therapist. You got give them the tools, I give them the space. I'm there to train them and help them if they need it, but they're free to do their own thing.
Hmm. And so at the beginning, when you were telling me about how hiring was an important way to set the tone, an important way to handle the quality control issue that first prompted you to even begin the practice in the first place,
Yeah.
it sounds like a big part of that is one of the values that you screen for is, are people going to be comfortable in a really autonomous space? Because not every clinician will be.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of them are, and I think one of the other things I screen for in the beginning is like in our job, like on Indeed, it says something like, if CBT is your main focus, like do not apply.
Okay.
So it's like anything but, like if you are interested in anything else, like humanistic, mindfulness, narrative, psychodynamic, if you are of any of those schools of thought, please apply, right? And we're rare, like we're already a minority in this sort of manualized CBT world, so it's hard and easy at the same time to find people who gravitate to the message. You know what I mean? Because when you're a niche, it rules out a lot of people instantaneously, but it also attracts those people that are in alignment as well.
Well, that authenticity is vital both to attracting clients as well as clinicians. You're going to build something that's sustainable, and you've got, is it, I think, 15 or 16 clinicians,
17 right now. Yeah.
17 clinicians. That's enough clinicians where for them to stick around, they've got to believe in the authenticity of what's there, right? The organization starts to take shape beyond its founder. And you've deliberately set up an organization such that you're maybe a little less involved. You're not micromanaging the way perhaps some other practice owners are. So part of what is sustaining what keeps 17 clinicians there working is there has to be something real and authentic about it. That energy has to jive with them.
Sure. Yeah. No. For absolutely. And I think I have a clinical director. She's been with me for a lot of years, and she recently sort of promoted and given her that role, and she's just way better at fostering those relationships, with the therapist
Yes.
than I am. Like I like spending my time on like thinking about marketing or thinking about like business development and things like that. Like that's what I prefer to do, and she's really good at nurturing relationships and fostering those other things, so it's a good balance. Whereas before, I think it was too much autonomy, right? Like I think I had some turnover because it was too much, like,
Yeah.
like it was like, we call it leading from the back. I think people call that leadership style, right? You're like, just, all right, guys, go ahead, have at it. And I think I was too much in that. So now it's a little bit better. There's a little bit more, a little bit more support and involvement with her style. So it's good.
Awesome. Awesome. I love what you have built, and I love how true to you it is. I'm curious to know as we come towards the end of our time together, what is fun for you when you're not working? So, you built a meaningful business and you have some great people working for you. So you have some time to do other things. What is fun for you when you're not working?
I'm playing with my son. I have a 5-year-old son, so playing with him, that's super fun. And I do music, so I make beats. I DJ and also do hip hop. So those are kind of like my hobbies. I'll go hiking. I love being out in nature, and yeah, I'd say those are like my fun activities outside of running the business. Yeah.
So, Patrick, I appreciate you so much. And I think there's lots of insights and really, really cool philosophy for other practice owners to ponder. So, thanks for jamming with me.
Yeah, man. No, you're welcome. Good to be here.